Tensions between the United States and Europe are rising as the United States signals a withdrawal and President Trump increases pressure on Europe. Things have gotten so bad that some are even saying the Atlantic Alliance is over. Today, let's take a closer look at this issue. Let's get right into it. The Atlantic Alliance between Europe and the United States has collapsed. This isn't just my personal opinion. Bruno Tertrace, the deputy director of the French Foundation for Strategic Research, commented on the current situation, saying that the Atlantic Alliance between Europe and the United States has broken down, and that we can't even be sure Article 5 of the NATO Charter will be upheld. Europe is currently worried about being abandoned by the United States. The Trump administration unveiled a new national security strategy on December 5th, including a section that might upset Europe. The Trump administration's strategy strongly criticized Europe's security policy. CNN showed contempt for Europe by criticizing and pointing out flaws in Europe's security plans. In particular, it was predicted that the populations of some NATO member countries would be filled with non-Europeans, and as the number of white people decreases to the point of being unrecognizable within 20 years, they would become dependent on alliances with the United States. It said strong right-wing, anti-immigration parties like Germany's AfD or the United Kingdom's Reform Party should be backed to oppose the current European Union system. The Trump administration was seen as inspiring optimism for patriotic European parties, with claims that the United States should back groups opposing immigration and promoting nationalism to spark resistance across Europe. It even said that some countries in Europe are no longer viable. United States pressure on Europe went beyond strategy papers. President Trump also directly criticized Europe. In an interview with Politico, President Trump said that when he looks at Europe's political leaders, he thinks they are weak, and at the same time, he sees that they want to be too politically correct. He also said they appear unsure of what to do, that Europe is lost in both immigration and trade policy, and that political correctness is weakening them. President Trump was pouring out criticism toward Europe. He also restated his plan to back European political candidates with similar views, as noted earlier in the national security strategy. As President Trump continued to criticize Europe and even warned about the collapse of civilization, the European Union strongly pushed back. Antonio Costa, president of the European Council, criticized President Trump, stating allies shouldn't interfere in or threaten each other's political or democratic decisions. He also criticized President Trump's remarks, saying Europe and the United States should act as allies. Germany's foreign minister Johann Badeful rejected the idea, stating Germany doesn't need advice from other countries. Recently, the European Union fined X 20 billion won for breaking transparency and content rules. As a result, the conflict between the United States and Europe appears to be intensifying. The European Union is also conducting further investigations into Meta, Google, and Apple, so it is accelerating its crackdown on big tech companies. It appears the United States is preparing to respond as well. The United States protests, insisting it must use all means to counter these unfair measures. In particular, the United States Trade Representative points out that, if necessary, United States law allows for the imposition of fees or restrictions on foreign services. They are directly naming major European companies like Accenture, DHM, Mistral, Siemens, and Spotify. They're putting this into action. The United States also suspended the $59 trillion Technology Prosperity Agreement with the United Kingdom. This agreement involves American tech companies like Microsoft and Google investing in the United Kingdom and cooperating in fields such as AI. However, after the United Kingdom imposed a 2% digital services tax on American tech companies' revenue, the United States suspended related talks. Now, the United States is likely to undergo a major restructuring of its overall military strategy. Currently, the plan being discussed in Washington is to consolidate many of the United States military's regional command structures. In particular, there is a proposal to combine the Central Command, European Command, and Africa Command into a single international command. This is seen as shifting United States military resources from the Middle East and Europe to focus on the Western Hemisphere, especially the United States and the Americas, aligning with the Trump administration's strategy. Through this military restructuring, the United States is signaling that it will no longer maintain its role as a hegemonic power managing the entire world simultaneously, but will instead choose to focus on regions directly related to its own security. Europe is clearly the most shocked by this trend. It is known that the United States has already delivered very specific demands to Europe, namely that by 2027, Europe should take direct responsibility for most of NATO's conventional defense capabilities. Reuters, citing United States officials, reported that the Department of Defense clarified this policy in a closed meeting with a European delegation in Washington, District of Columbia. The United States warned that if Europe misses the 2027 goal, it may withdraw from key NATO defense systems, including military planning and troop adjustments. While this may seem like a shift in alliance roles, it is seen as a sign the United States may soon give up its European defense leadership. Of course, it is true that European countries have recently been increasing their defense budgets, expanding weapons production, and accelerating rearmament. However, in reality, unlike simulations or games, it takes a considerable amount of time to build a military production system and enhance troop operational capabilities. Therefore, most in Europe believe taking full responsibility for conventional defense by 2027 is unrealistic, though the United States' intentions are clear. If the center of conventional force operations within NATO actually shifts from the United States to Europe, there is a high possibility that the alliance order, which the United States has led for decades since the war, will fundamentally change. This move signals the United States is stepping back from being the main guarantor of global security, indicating a shift toward neo-isolationism. In the end, what many people are curious about is this: so what can Europe do right now? To be frank, Europe is not at a stage where it can make choices right now. It's more in a stage of just holding on. First, the often mentioned creation of a joint European Union military has been discussed for decades, but in reality, there has been almost no progress. The reason is that each European country has a completely different perception of threats. Eastern Europe views Russia as the main threat. Southern Europe worries more about immigration and security from North Africa and the Middle East, while Western Europe prioritizes economic and social stability. These differing concerns make a unified military command structure very difficult. In addition, the defense industry is fragmented by country, making it difficult to standardize weapons or produce them in large quantities. Even if there is agreement on the need for military integration during peacetime, once a crisis passes, each country tends to go back to acting on its own, and this pattern has repeated itself. Germany's case makes the problem clearer. Although Germany is at the center of Europe in terms of economic scale, for historical reasons, it has no choice but to be extremely cautious about putting military leadership at the forefront. Due to its coalition government structure, it is also not easy to make bold defense decisions. On top of that, there is considerable internal pressure caused by immigration issues. European countries face public safety and social integration challenges after large-scale immigration, limiting their focus on defense or diplomacy. Economic issues also hinder Europe's ability to act independently. With high inflation, slow growth, and high energy costs, there's little room to increase military spending like before. Raising the defense budget now means cutting welfare or raising taxes, leading to backlash. Strengthening military power is also not progressing as quickly as declared. With a shortage of personnel, limited military production capacity, and a society accustomed to long-term peace, it does not seem easy to rapidly increase military strength in a short period of time. Considering all these conditions, Europe is not in a position to immediately fill the gap left by the United States. It can be seen that Europe lacks the political, economic, and military readiness to discuss strategic independence at this stage. Meanwhile, Russia is watching these situations calmly and carefully. This is because the greater the conflict between the United States and Europe, the more Russia's strategic position automatically expands, even without the sound of gunfire. The current situation is developing in such a way that the West is dividing itself without Russia having to do anything directly, and Kremlin is not missing this opportunity. When the United States released its new national security strategy, Russia quickly issued an official and significant response. The Russian government stated that the document aligns with much of Russia's existing views and welcomed it, which is something rarely seen since the end of the Cold War. When the United States stops viewing Europe as a unified alliance and sees it as unstable and unreliable, Russia believes its claim of Western division is coming true. In particular, the United States openly raising issues about Europe's political situation and value system, and even expressing support for certain political forces within Europe, creates an ideal environment from Russia's perspective. Russia has long emphasized European divisions to undermine sanctions, and these splits are now worsening due to signals from Washington. As the United States and Europe disagree on supporting Ukraine and the post-war order, Russia finds more justification to break diplomatic isolation, increasing the chance that sanctions-weary European nations may adopt a more realistic approach. The Kremlin welcomed the recent United States State Department strategy not just as a diplomatic gesture, but to show confidence that the international order no longer only disadvantages Russia. The moment the unified voice of the West disappears, Russia will be able to secure a much more advantageous position at the negotiating table, and there will be room for them to design the endpoint of the war at a level they can handle. In the end, the more the United States and Europe pour out words of distrust toward each other, the more Russia quietly widens the gap and catches its breath on the international stage. What do you think about the current conflict between the United States and Europe? Please let us know in the comments. That concludes this video. Thank you.